this meeting of the IT committee to order. Consider all the caveats and rules about remote participation as having been read. Welcome our new member, Amar Clark.
Thank you.
And our first agenda item, as always, is public input. I'll go through the motions here. If there is any member of the public present who wishes to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda for this evening, now would be the time to raise your hand and speak. Seeing as how we have no members of the public in attendance, and apparently none of us wish to speak as a member of the public right now.
I didn't understand what was supposed to happen on the link, Dave. I used the link in the agenda and I got to where it asked, it had my name in the, maybe it's on my computer, the name.
Yeah.
And it asked for my email address and I put it in and it said, you can't be put in as a member, as a whatever, as a panelist, but it didn't seem to be any path to be other than a panelist.
Yeah, normally the way these things are set up, and I'd have to check and see how Cindy set it up this time, but normally how it's set up is you should be able to join the webinar as an attendee. And if maybe this one was, I'm not sure I'll be able to see the settings right here.
Yeah, so in the panelist email, when it comes directly from Zoom, I always just click the click here to join link that's in there. So
Right.
if you're clicking that and it's not working, I wonder if your email is truncating the
No,
URL in there.
No. Two different things. I just moments ago received a Zoom message that has a clickable link, and that's how I got in here.
Yeah.
Oh, you weren't receiving that before.
What I
Oh.
got before, like yesterday or whenever from Dave, was the agenda and the other materials.
Right.
And that has a link in it. And after I couldn't click on that link at all when it was in Mac Mail, but when I put it out in a document, I was able to click on it and
Yeah.
use it preview.
I see.
That's
Yeah.
what got me to there, and that's the link that anybody else would use. And I don't see any obvious problem, like a carriage return in the middle of the link or anything like that.
So the one that's in the email is for not panelist.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's slightly different link than the one that comes from Zoom directly.
Right.
Like, so I get that one on May 26th. Usually like when Dave schedules the meeting in Zoom is when I get that email. So if you're not getting the email, then I wonder why.
Yeah, I got it on
Yeah.
the 26th also.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your
I don't-
panelist invite
Midnight.
should have gone out.
Oh, I have an idea.
Yeah, and I just when I got your email about being unable to join, I had Zoom send you out a new panelist invite.
Yeah, and I got it. I think maybe when I'm trying to find the link, I look for Dave Robbins, for mail from Dave Robbins.
Yeah,
And I should be looking for mail from Zoom.
From Zoom.
Yeah, it comes
Yeah.
directly
So-
from Zoom.
I have about 5 different, maybe 6 different Zoom meeting streams. And I think every one of them is done differently.
Yeah, but that
Yeah.
can be hard to keep track. In my mail client, I make a point to put a red flag on all my Zoom invitations. But if I have several of them, which happens on occasion, I have to pay close attention to see which link for which meeting or which email for which meeting.
Yeah, well, I'm semi-organized that way, but only semi. Okay, anyway, we seem to have gathered, and hopefully, what if anybody else wants to get in here that didn't get mailed a Zoom link, then they should run into what I just ran into with the
So-
agenda link.
So they
I
would click on the
think-
link in the agenda, which would have them come as an attendee and not a panelist. And so they would end up going into like a lobby section until Dave opens up the meeting for them.
Right,
Actually,
and
I just joined it as an attendee and it let me right in.
Well, because the meeting has started, but before the meeting
Okay.
starts, you would not,
Oh, right. Yep.
like, it has to be opened up by the panel, the meeting host.
And I'm wondering if because Bob is a panelist and he was trying to join as an attendee, it wasn't letting him do that.
It should let him join as an attendee, but he wouldn't be able to be a panelist that way.
Right.
Oh, okay.
nor-
Yeah, I
normally,
don't know.
right, normally when you join as an attendee, I can promote you to be a panelist.
Right. But we didn't seem to get to where you got a chance to do that.
Right, You didn't,
Uh,
seem to get that.
Since I'm in, I'm not too worried about it for me. But if there's anybody else who wants to get in here, I wonder if Evan is coming. I wonder if he's
Yeah.
got a link.
Yeah. No, Evan is not, Evan had told me ahead of time he was not gonna be able to make it.
Okay. What about all those public commenters?
That's a good question. I'm just, I'm not sure I really want to take all the time, but Zoom has so many options of various kinds that you can put
Mhm.
in there that you would think ordinarily a webinar would allow attendees to join.
Yeah, so
As attendees.
yeah, so generally what happens is you can start the meeting for panelists before attendees are able to join. And so when it
Yep.
like actually starts is when all the attendees that are waiting for it to start will be tossed in. And so if Bob had tried to join as an attendee while we were on here, he would have just been sitting there not being able to join until the meeting has started, or you let the attendees in. Is what he.
Oh, it was
That- yeah.
Dave's fault for not seeing me. I see. Okay.
Well, that is also always a possibility. Anyway, so with that sort of logistics aside, let's get into the main item on our agenda. As I just said, Evan was unable to join us this evening. He did send out, as I sent out to all you, the draft RFP, which actually was what Evan wrote up last year. And you can tell from particularly from the dates in there, that it hasn't been updated. I'm assuming Evan's kind of expecting us to review and, offer him comments and suggestions. I'm assuming we can take it as given that he will update sort of the boilerplate stuff regarding the current status of our IT services contracts and the deadline dates for responding, the dates for an on-site meeting. I'm assuming he'll update those dates to reflect the schedule when he finally gets this sent out.
Perhaps we should mention it to him though, since we're reviewing. And
Yes.
I'm not sure that there's anything else we need to say.
Yes, I think we would mention to Evan that we assume you will take care of that kind of stuff. And you won't
Well,
overlook.
there is that kind of stuff to be attended to. And
Yes,
we assume that you've got the handle on that.
yeah, so I'm kind of guessing that the meat of this that we probably want to spend time reviewing is the services required. I think I took sort of a pass or two looking through that, and like I said, that hasn't changed from what Evan wrote up last year. We may want to have some suggestions, like, is there any major topic area that is missing? Are there details there that we think ought to be updated or included?
So what are we doing? What's the mechanism for capturing like notes or input feedback? Are we just blurting it out here? Are we gonna do like markup or?
I'm kind of inclined to be fairly informal about it. I will take notes, and I will probably download the recording of the meeting to make sure that that I don't miss anything, rather than trying to take all the notes on the fly. But then I thought I would, anything. Yeah, I don't know that we want to, sort of get to the level of, nitpicky wordsmithing on it. It's more
Right.
more major, particularly because Evan hasn't had a chance to update this since last year. So he will probably want to do some of the more detailed wordsmithing, independent of whatever suggestions we offer. So it's probably better for us to approach it more from a higher level, conceptual level, topic areas that need to be addressed,
So-
suggestions that we may have.
Would the plan be him to still have the meeting with the interested parties? You think?
I would, right, I would assume that he would be wanting to do that.
Okay.
Again,
That's a non-mandatory meeting. Sometimes they're mandatory
Right.
and sometimes they're, if you want to, you can come.
So the one thing I would think would be from a vendor side, an asset inventory, right? What are all these systems? Like how many and the OSs? And the
So-
apps?
Yeah, so that's already in there, though. That's in 3G, 3G5.
Yeah, that's in there as what we expect the vendor to do. Bob, I think, are you thinking that, sort of in preparation for the on-site meeting, that the vendors coming to meet with us might be interested in?
But so when
Something along
55 PCs, so are those Windows? Are they Chromebooks? Are they desktops? Are they laptops?
Yeah.
Right?
So that's more for the purpose of giving the prospective vendor a better picture of what they're be dealing with. Is that what? Is that your
Exactly,
point, Bob?
especially if you're doing, level 1 support, you want to know what OS and what you're gonna having to deal with. And then also the firewall, like the Sonic walls, right? Cisco.
Are-
whatever.
So
Are
are
you-
you talking about 3G6, that part? We're talking about the remediation?
Well, if we're soliciting a vendor for all these services, right?
Yeah.
Then the vendor would want to know, what am I walking into, how much, right? And
Right.
what does it look like?
Oh,
right?
you're
Are
saying
you
that
saying-
providing to them a list of this is what our assets are going into it, so they would have a good feel for what it is, the
Yeah,
footprint?
because if I'm bidding, it's, a driver for what I propose, right, from my cost structure.
Yeah.
But Is
If
that,
everything's Windows and, Win 10 or Win 11, then that's.
Bob, are you saying that should be in this document? Isn't that the purpose of the visit?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. If he's gonna do it in the visit, then he's covered, right? That's why I asked the first question.
Yeah, so I mean, so like for RFPs that I generally do, the actual layout of the specifics is not generally in there, usually besides numbers. And that type of thing is usually fleshed out once you get to the point of having interested parties is the way, I mean, I don't know if that's different for governments and such, but I generally, that for, at least for me, would be a second phase type thing, like what you're calling the meeting here, like the interested party meeting.
Right.
Yeah, that would seem to, to me, that would seem to make sense, that we don't need to spell out that level of detail in an RFP, but the vendors, as part of preparing a bid, they want to get a sense of what they'll be working with.
Yeah, so to Bob's point here, we probably would want to have a list of this is what we want to present at that interested party meeting, though. I mean, not necessarily as part of the RFP, but as a next thing that we kind of work on with Evan, we probably want to have that type of stuff put together and figure out what it is that we want to make sure that they have available, because I think Bob has a good point as far as what he was saying there.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
good. We'll
Yeah.
certainly forward that suggestion to Evan, and kind of while we're on the topic of an on-site visit for prospective vendors, are there other particular items that we should be prepared for, Evan should be prepared to have available for that visit?
For on-site meeting, I mean, generally those would be the pretty like a lot more detailed question and answer session where you basically are saying, this is what our environment is. We run these OSs, we run these applications. These are our, this is the devices we have. This is our wireless infrastructure, our wired infrastructure, our security infrastructure, VPN infrastructure. Kind of going through all the details so they know what it is you're running and how much of it you're running, and then answer whatever questions they may have after that. Is usually what I experience.
Yeah, and Evan has done this before, so he probably has a pretty good idea about that.
Yeah. I would want to see
Yeah.
diagrams if I was walking into this.
Yeah,
High level diagrams, you don't need to have a lot of detail, but
Well, at least
how is
like,
it laid out?
If someone putting out there and they've got a bunch of, Win XP and they're expecting me to do all these upgrades, right? And
Right.
Well, so you say Win XP and we kind of all chuckle, but a lot of vendors are treating Windows 7 the same way. And I'm pretty sure we still have a
Mhm.
couple of those because of software or application requirements, right?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
Evan has said he's upgraded at least most of the Win 7s.
Yeah.
But yeah, there may be, I don't remember off the top of my head, but there may be one or two of those still hanging around.
Yeah.
So that's actually a good point. So like I made a lot of notes that I had to talk through stuff for tonight, but one thing I didn't mention that kind of brings up is part of like strategic planning would be maybe what planning would go around, what security safeguards need to be done for systems that can't be you can't have patches for security remediation for because it's no longer under support, such as Windows 7. Like I know I'm in the same boat on campus we have some ancient applications that require Windows 7 still, and we ended up just locking those things up so they can't be accessed from the internal network other than specific things. So I mean, that might be something that should be part of the strategic planning or part of this, a plan for how do you safeguard things that you can't patch.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what you want them to provide once they get the job.
Oh
Right.
yeah, so that's what, so it'd be in the RFP for, this is, one of the things that would be part of the, ask duties. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it would kind of fit under 3C security.
Probably, yeah.
As to listing a whole lot of detail here about what we have, I wonder if that's a really good security thing to do. Passing that around to anybody that wants a copy.
You mean like the list we talked about for the interested party meeting?
For the in this RFP.
So I wouldn't go into details as far as
Right.
Like what there is. I would just call out plans to safeguard infrastructures that are unable to be
Got it.
patched or whatever.
Yeah, the other thing I didn't see, it says 15 out for on-site support and user support 15 hours, blah, 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 mutually agreed upon. But there's no notice or anything about the mechanism, right? Whether they gotta use and log tickets, right? Or bring a ticket system or use an internal, how they're gonna manage work, right? And tasks.
Yeah, and I think everyone is going to be a little bit different on that, right? It depends how big the shop is, and a lot of them will have their
Right,
own
but
help desk, right?
the intent and purpose would be for them to use something, right?
Yeah,
And not just work off of, email, right? That they would have some more discipline, I doubt they would have like a ServiceNow or something like that, but some ticketing system.
Yeah, and I think that having Evan's feedback on what works best for the staff or the administration there to work with them, to call out in there some sort of process to do that would make sense. I mean, I personally can't say what works best for them, but you're absolutely right. They need to have some sort of defined mechanism for doing that.
Right, so what you would put in an RFP for that would be, something that's fairly.
That the vendor
abstract.
would utilize
Yeah.
IT service management, right? Following ITIL best practices or something along those
Something
lines.
along those
Yeah,
lines.
yeah, ITSM procedures.
The other thing that I didn't see in there, and I don't know if it's something that we would want to consider, is there wasn't anything in there about remote support. And or at least that I didn't see anything about remote support. And I think that from a cost perspective, you're always going to pay more to have somebody come on site and do something than if you could do it remotely or in a hybrid fashion, right? So
They have it under security as remote access.
Well-
And in a secure environment and remote access administration.
So,
Mhm.
are we talking about two different things here? So there's remote access support for Grafton employees to do remote functions, but there's also remote access support for the vendor to remotely connect in to do functions. I think Amar is meaning the latter there, like something spelled out in here that not only would they be expected 15 hours per week, but also some sort of SLA for remote support as needed.
Yeah,
that-
like I forgot my password on a Monday morning. Do I want to wait for the guy to show up and help me reset it, or do I want to just pick up the phone and he does it remotely for me, sort of a thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Now, and I think Evan's intent is for some of that kind of function to be supported by local staff.
Okay.
And
That always goes well.
yeah, I mean, that can get you only so far. The RFP under item G talks about remote monitoring and maintenance services, remote monitoring and alerting. None of those items quite explicitly address some of the remote support topics that we might encounter.
Yeah, that's kind of so I'm just kind of waiting on tossing out all the things that I had notes on, but that's one of the things I had listed was that there's 24/7 remote monitoring and alerting, but there's not really any spelling out of what the actionable deliverable would be for doing so and what the SLA or how that would work basically. That there's is pretty vague there. And I know we don't want to get specifics, but this was so vague. I'm not necessarily sure exactly what we're asking for from that standpoint.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to ask for them to be able to remotely monitor the systems and the network and provide some remote maintenance. But the topic Amar brought up here is more specifically remotely responding to problems that users have.
Well, I mean, not just that, also like all the things that are in 3G, like drive space monitoring and website monitoring, all these different pieces here besides just the user account administration. Like, what is the action if you get alerts saying that there's an application error or there's drive spaces run out on a database server or something, like what is the actionable item there in those cases?
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can monitor things all you want, but if you don't act on what the monitoring reveals to you, that's, well, why are you bothering to monitor then?
Right. Yeah. You have to monitor, alert, and then you have to take action.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that presumably there will be some sort of service level agreement around, response times and things like that. Weekends, holidays, evenings, it's
Yeah,
gonna vary.
Yeah, there's no SLA spelled out anywhere in the document for what the SLA would be for any of these type of things. And I'm not sure if that's typical for local municipalities with vendor agreements or not, but that's something that I generally would expect to see with any kind of vendor agreement.
Right, I would think it would be in there.
Yeah.
And then without context also, I see it at the end here with the pricing, but is this purely the award and scoring is based on lowest price, or is there some rubric and, low price doesn't necessarily mean you get the business, right?
Yeah, I would think we would want to take into account factors besides price.
Yeah, so
Right,
the
otherwise,
interesting,
why are you asking them all this other crap above, right? Years in service and all this other stuff if it's strictly price.
yeah, so the interesting thing is that the price is oftentimes the big deciding factor on these types of things, as we all know. But the evaluation criteria and process does not mention price there at all. It
Right.
says it'll be based on experience or understanding of services, personal experience, project approach, local availability, compatibility, satisfaction. Nowhere in there does it mention price.
Hmm.
Yeah, there are two different bidding situations. And I suspect this is under the one where you get to choose the one you like, not the one that's lowest.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
too
true.
hard. It's not like how many tons of paving material.
Right, but like what Alan was saying, usually there's a rubric, right? Okay, the experience weighting is, 10%, right?
Hmm.
And the approach, that's 20%.
I don't think Evan is, mention it to Evan, but I don't think that that's something we have to worry too much about. That's about, he's a chief financial officer. He's the one who's supposed to know how to structure that.
Yeah, I mean, you actually have a spreadsheet for that specific thing. You fill in what the evaluation items would be, and then you have a scale and do exactly what Bob was just mentioning. But I mean,
Because
at that
otherwise
point,
your vendors are savvy enough to know that if there's an incumbent and they're happy, that, the incumbent has a leg up and everyone else is just column fodder to get the price down. These guys game this, they do this for every municipality on the other side. So they know how it works. If you want quality responses,
in the end, it's whoever Evan feels the best about. Now, part of that is influenced by he can only afford one out of the three.
Yeah.
We've had that with certain other purchases, right?
Yeah,
right?
Like a system fairly recently.
yeah,
But I think that my sense, having heard Evan talk, is what he's comfortable with. Well, what he makes an overall, this is the best answer.
Well, I mean, in the end, this is like, it's different than when you have a committee for organization or a business where, you have a group that decides. In the end, the decision is pretty much his, right? So he uses these as factors to make his decision. And I mean, however he's going to best come up with that, I guess that's his decision.
I think Dave could mention that, we talked about that.
yeah.
Trust that he is on it. I mean, that's what he gets paid to do, actually. Know about that stuff. And do a good job of it.
So, I think overall, if what I think I'm interested is for this is make sure that the RFP does a reasonably good job of describing what the town wants from the vendor. What do we expect the vendor to be doing for us? That's sort of I think that's kind of the meat of it is, and the peripheral aspects are like we started out the discussion with, giving a prospective vendor enough information so that they can put in a bid that they're comfortable with. That's the site visit, them knowing roughly what we've got for them to work with. And we've touched on a few items so far of the the services required.
So I mean, if it's okay, I don't mind starting in on some of the things that I have
No.
that I
Yeah,
wanted to
absolutely.
at
Let's
least
go through
Yeah, at least-
everything anybody has.
bring up. So the first one that I had was in 3A, was regarding the server administration services. And this kind of gets back to the whole no SLA thing, but it talks about preventative maintenance it does not, it also talks about backup, but does not necessarily spell out patching or patch timetables, especially severe vulnerabilities when you're worried about 0-day exploits. The only thing close to this that like mentions remediation is in 3G6, but even that is kind of more, it's very vague, like we said earlier, as far as what that means. So I think that is probably a good idea, along with SLA discussions, to have a timetable on, especially for high severity vulnerabilities for our public facing applications or even internal systems to be patched in a timely fashion.
Yep.
Yeah, I had that on my list as well. If we want to establish some sort of a cadence for patching, and then, you know, what to do for special cases, right? Things that are.
Yeah, I mean, you probably fairly typically hear about, sort of a regular schedule for doing patches, like once a month or once a week, patch Tuesdays, or however that's typically done. But yeah, there are occasions when you have to be more responsive.
Yeah, so and I believe we're mostly a Windows shop here, and so Microsoft does have a monthly patch cycle that they do have every month come out with fixes or security patches or whatnot. And I mean, there's some argument on whether it's better to go every month on that or once a quarter, in the case on some of those things, because you take down a system to prevent downtime is kind of, a little bit of an oxymoron. But so, I mean, that type of thing, as long as there's some planned timetable that's not enormously big, I don't know if I'm necessarily super worried about it, but absolutely the things that are severe vulnerabilities, like I feel like there needs to be some sort of timeline that, or
Yeah.
SLA that's expected for that.
Yeah, so I would tend to think of it in terms of the vendor here will institute a regular patch schedule, but also will be prepared to react outside of that normal schedule whenever warranted. I'm not sure the best way to word that, but I think that's the idea.
Emergency patching schedule
Yeah.
and SLA.
Yep.
Okay. Next one I had was in 3B for network administration services. So I was thrown off a little bit because it calls them security devices, which I mean, I normally call them network devices. I'm not worried about that as much as it doesn't mention at all the wireless network infrastructure anywhere in there or anywhere else I could find in here. It only talks about the wired infrastructure, and obviously the wireless is important to be mentioned as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, as some of us know from experience, that we very much depend upon the wireless infrastructure in the municipal center to be fully functional.
Back when we used to meet in a room there and
Yes.
needed to work for our meeting, and it didn't.
Yep, we've Bob and I have experienced meetings basically being disrupted by poor or non-existent Wi-Fi access.
Like planning board meetings.
Yeah.
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 Nobody microwave anything on the Wi-Fi.
Yes, I think the Wi-Fi access points and infrastructure we have now are much more robust than they were a few years ago.
Yeah, they seem pretty solid.
Yeah, it's probably a lot more important now, what with Zoom. You have to have, as the Board of Selectmen's meeting showed last week, if the technology is not fully functional, you have to cancel the meeting.
Yep. Yep. I never did hear in detail what their technical issues were, but
I did, being on the cable committee and all that
Yeah.
stuff. If you want to hear about it, I'm perfectly happy to tell you, but if I can remember.
Suffice it to say that the occasion has passed and hopefully won't be repeated.
Actually, somebody turned something off that no one should have been around, to touch.
Ooh,
A power strip in a rack in the control booth
And it
was
took,
turned off.
and it took 2 meetings worth to
No,
identify that. But
one
they had to
minute.
reschedule a second time though.
Now
No,
that second rescheduling was due to open meeting law requirements for meeting notices being posted.
I
Oh,
wondered-
because it was too soon for a scheduled date change. They needed at least 48 hours.
right.
Gotcha.
Except for an emergency meeting. When I saw that come out, I decided not to bother anybody, but I really doubted that they could do that.
Gotcha.
That they could just move to the next night.
They got that resolved the next morning. Realizing that they couldn't just kick it one night.
You'd think that people would, by the time they get to those positions in the world, that they know the rules.
Funny
But-
thing, Bob, that thought occurred to me too at the time, but
You were probably in the room, Ryan.
I know I wasn't in the room. So.
Oh,
I wasn't in the room that meeting either. I was up at the school committee meeting that night. So when I was done there, I was like, wait, there's no select board meeting?
Yeah.
So another one for 3B is the same network administration services. It calls out capacity management, troubleshooting and such. But one thing that probably should be done like at least once or twice a year would be some sort of testing of backup or DR strategy or any kind of resilience testing to make sure that what is being done actually is doing what is expected. So we don't end
Oh,
up in a
yes.
situation that's bad.
Yeah.
Yes,
HA failover test or whatever it is,
I personally, in my work experience and some other guys and colleagues have experienced the fact of believing you have a backup and then finding out that you really don't.
yes.
Yeah.
Do you recall that back early in this committee's history, that was discovered?
Yes.
They were, there was something like, there was a tape that was being handled, only nothing was getting on it. So people were doing whatever they were told to do about swapping tapes or whatever, but there was nothing on the tapes.
Yeah, it's actually a very common thing. I mean,
Yes.
it really is very common that things are planned out and never tested, and all of a sudden when you need it, it's like it's not there. There was a university a couple months ago, 2 months ago or so, that literally had to close down for good because they had a ransomware attack and the backups and the resilience planning that they had that they assumed was going to be fine was not valid. It wouldn't work. And so they said it would be an enormous cost and amount of time for them to be able to spend it back up or get everything rebuilt. It probably wouldn't be ready for next fall either. And so they ended up making decisions because they were already pretty slim profit levels to just close the university for good because of that.
Wow.
Yep, that's kind of an extreme example, but not
I mean, there are
really extreme. It can happen.
who was it? There was someone just recently, there was a some power vendor just recently had, I know it wasn't power, I don't know. So there's some vendor recently that I remember reading where literally 30% of their user base could not use their service for over a month because of backup failures, and they couldn't restore those users. And for them, the only option would have been to roll back to a full backup that they had previously. And that would have set back all the other people who were working for all those days as well. So it was a kind of lose-lose situation. So obviously the incrementals were failing, but the full restore worked like once a quarter or whatever they're doing. And so their end result was they ended up having to take the full restore and back it up to a different location and then manually move over the data for all the customers that
Oh boy.
yeah, it was bad. So anyway, so yeah, I think that's a pretty important thing to make sure that we have tested at least a couple times a year.
I think you can never underestimate the importance of not only having a backup and disaster recovery strategy, but of verifying that it actually works.
Yeah, and I've always felt, I don't know that I ever got a chance to actually do it back in the day, but I always felt that you should actually do it.
Yes.
Actually restore and from whatever and prove physically that you can. I was
Yeah.
never in a situation where there was enough hardware to even have a chance of doing that, but
Yeah, when I was the principal engineer for Computer Associates for all those years, we actually had a separate environment that we would do once a quarter test where we would actually fail over to the DR environment and do a full recovery back there and verify that the critical DR, in-scope DR applications and data were restored correctly and were able to be functioned. I mean, just to make sure that that wasn't going to be a problem that we ran into.
Yeah.
must have been nice to have all that resource to.
Hey, when you work for corporations, there's a little bit more money available.
Yep, yep. When I
Yeah.
worked for Commerce Insurance, they would actually, like, a bunch of people would go down to New Jersey to SunGuard, where we had our like DR site, and they had contracted to have like basically a copy of all of our stuff, including our mainframes and everything down there, and restore all the tapes to it and run all these tests and verify that it worked. Not saying that the town could ever do something like that, but it is
No.
done in industry. Right?
Yep, and whatever we actually can practically do at the town level here, it's our IT infrastructure is really mission critical. And so we need to, we need our prospective IT vendors to make sure that we want them to be able to come up with a practical strategy for verifying that our backup DR plans really work.
Yeah, you might not be able to
However
do a
exactly they
full,
can make it happen.
yeah, you may not be able to afford to do a full recovery or a full DR test type thing, but you definitely can do data verification or validation that
Yep.
what's there is supposed to be there, or what's supposed to be
Yeah.
there is there.
And
Yep.
shouldn't it be done periodically, not just once?
No,
Yeah.
it should be
Yeah.
like once or twice a year, honestly.
Because it worked, so, okay, that's good. Probably that backup that I was talking about worked the first time. Well, I don't know who set it up.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know who found it. He's
Yeah.
he just finished his most recent town job as chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Oh, Peter.
Yep. Yeah, Peter once upon a time was a member of this IT committee. For a while, Peter was our IT contractor.
Yeah, Peter's told me some good old stories from the old days of Grafton IT. So next thing I had was in 3C under security. They do talk about doing security audits. One thing that we've talked a little bit over the last year to do with some of our applications, probably is a good idea to here as well, to be at least once a year as part of the audit, also do penetration testing or some sort of, at least minimally some sort of testing with like Tenable or whatever affordable solution there is for verifying what is open is expected to be open and there's not vulnerabilities and such that you can get from report for it.
Yeah, also configurations, checking the configuration, right? Make sure that, PCs are locked down like they should be.
Yeah.
So I concur. I had that on my
Hey.
list.
Is that really something that we would want our IT vendor to be doing? Like, is there a conflict of interest there in terms of the people that are securing our network would also be testing our network?
So it depends on what your purpose is for. If you're doing it for an audit from some other agency reasons, then absolutely you would need to have a third party do it. If you're doing an audit for your own internal purposes to be aware of stuff that needs to be fixed, then it's totally okay and appropriate for them to do it via their means. And in this case, I would think it would be for the purpose of catching things that they're not aware of as things that need to be fixed. So I normally will have both internal penetration testing and security audits done, as well as external ones done for specific audits that we need to have the report for.
Okay.
Yeah, so the topic of a third party security audit, including penetration testing and whatever else, that's outside, I suppose that's outside the scope of this RFP, but it's something that,
Right.
it's something that Evan should keep in mind as something that would probably be,
The
probably be
RFP
the
should be
benefit
doing
of
the
the town.
scans.
Hmm.
That should be in the scope of services. I would think that'd be maybe in the monitoring section. They didn't have it.
Yeah, they don't, they didn't have that anywhere that I saw.
Okay.
Um,
So you've got
Another
more,
one-
Alan.
another one from 3C that I had was, they have, methods to monitor, and this kind of goes back to also another one back to having no SLA here, but a little bit different of a take is that they talk about the different alerting and such, but there is no actionable item for what to do when you find a system that is infected or has malicious payload on it, has malware in it, or some other part like joined to a botnet or some other method of providing lateral movement within your environment. So I would think as part of the call outs for the different pieces here, you would need to have some, like far as the 24/7 desktop server monitoring and alerting. I mean, you need to have an actionable item that says what to do, like that you need to do something to suspend a device or take it off the network, or have some process on who would make the call if the server is infected or, you know, or whatnot.
Yep, I would not disagree with that.
Okay, the next one that I had was in 3D under strategic planning. It's kind of a two-parter that actually says almost the same thing. I have two different notes that almost say the same thing that I put them twice. So they have talked about planning the different, you know, alternatives like different enhancements or server upgrades or such. Probably here you also would want to have some kind of 3-year plan, 5-year plan. I mean, I work off of a 5-year plan, but I don't know if that's realistic for this, especially when they're only a 3-year vendor. But you definitely want to have some kind of 3-year plan for a list of OSs, systems, devices that are end of life, end of support during a timetable, application dependencies that may need to, you know, be handled differently because the OS they're on is end of life. You know, some kind of 3-year planning, part of strategic planning on what they see as future hardware upgrade requirements or needs, or future application changes due to end of life software or OSs.
Yeah. Life cycle strategy is
Yeah.
kind of what the term for that we use.
I think the prior one Alan was talking about was more, the industry term is probably incident management, right? If there is an incident.
Yeah, that's, yeah, it's the mention. I'm really bad with the terms for things. Like I always get acronyms wrong also, so. Okay. So next one I had was 3E under training. I think the additional training for phishing and how to identify phishing and scam emails and such all make perfect sense. One of the biggest things that are being recommended for people to do training on from a security standpoint these days is to understand how MFA phishing attempts occur. And what I mean by that is, you know, we've had a lot of discussion. I assume by now that they have the VPN requiring MFA. I don't know, maybe they haven't got to that point yet. They've been talking about having switching over to the Microsoft O365 environment, and then as such having the VPN be able to use the Azure AD SAML MFA to function. So one of the things that people have found to be pretty often done is by hammering a system with a password that eventually sometimes people will just see a message and just without thinking just hit okay, you know, I assume that's fine, whatever. And that's how people are breaking MFA these days because of that. And so it's pretty recommended these days for security training at least once a year for understanding that other people can issue the MFA prompts for you via however you do it, text applications or whatever the method is, and be sure that they know and expect that prompt before approving it.
Yeah, I was reading something about that just recently about MFA phishing. and some of the techniques that the bad guys are using to try to convince folks. And that's, and that's one aspect of that I remember particularly reading in that article, wherever it was, I don't remember, was, hitting people with so many MFA prompts that they just get in the habit of, authorizing it without realizing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's becoming pretty common these days as a way to get around MFA, because MFA is becoming much wider, widespread, adopted as a obvious reasons, but so people have gotten to the point of where they're starting to find ways to encourage people to accept the MFA prompts.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I kind of skipped one. Sorry, back on 3D strategic planning. I also put in there something that was that I noticed that they don't have mentioned anything as far as identifying places as part of the 3 or 5 year or life cycle plan would be identifying places that there might be a cost savings from an operational standpoint or capital standpoint by moving specific applications to a cloud service environment. That doesn't make sense for everything, but there are sometimes cases where doing that will be better financially from all regards. And so that should probably be part of the 3-year plan.
Yeah, that's good.
Identifying things that are good to move to the cloud. I have a couple here that I scratched out. We already talked earlier about the dates. All the dates say 2021, so
yeah,
that's fine. I think that's most of my list I had that I found on my passes.
No, that's excellent. You
So-
got a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have caught.
One thing that I had a question about, and I didn't quite understand, is in 3C, section 1, where it says desktop server monitoring alerting. Is that just from a security perspective, or is that just like in general? Because monitoring a desktop, in my experience, is pretty uncommon, right? I mean, it seems overkill. If there's no application on a desktop, there's not really a need to monitor it.
Well,
Maybe there is, I don't know.
Yeah, no, so it depends. Like, so for my environment, the security team has they definitely monitor they don't monitor everything like the individual systems do, but the systems have applications or agents on them. I think the ones they use is tied to Microsoft Defender, Windows Defender environment, but different vendors have different similar things. And so it would be monitoring of bad behavior or applications being run by in methods that they aren't expected to be run, by call outs from executables that they shouldn't be run. There's different things that they watch for signatures or behavioral characteristics that will then send a alert to I don't know, like Azure Sentinel or whatever SIM or whatever method you're using to collect syslogs from it to be able to alert that there's something going on a desktop. So obviously it depends on the environment, on if it's worth it or not. Like, for instance, my team doesn't do it for personal systems that students have in their dorms, but they absolutely do it for the managed administration staff environment laptops that have more access to stuff. So I
think
would say
they had WatchGuard at one point, and that was monitoring all the desktops and laptops.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about having this as pretty high level, and so I think going any further in on a lot of this stuff would be getting into more of the nitty gritty that I'm not sure necessarily how it would be handled here. But I would say that there probably is some desktop server monitoring, whether it's via agents or some other method that's wanted. There is some sort of like disconnect between what's in 3C and 3G as far as monitoring from security standpoint and monitoring from systems standpoints. But so I guess in my opinion is a judgment call on how valuable the environment is and what the desktop have access to. And as far as I'm aware, this environment's a pretty flat environment that they haven't done too much in the way of special zones and such. So that would mean anything that's on the internal networks pretty much has access to anything that's critical in the environment. So it's probably high importance to keep an eye on what's going on there.
Yeah, perhaps it's sufficient. I mean, this you know, in 3C, the desktop monitoring is under the general topic of security. So that can mean, in detail, that can mean a number of different things that you might be doing, monitoring the desktops. But sort of, under the general topic of security, it seems like whatever monitoring turns out to be appropriate for security purposes.
Okay.
I mean, it ends up being a cost analysis thing on, is the time and cost for putting that on there and monitoring it worth the amount that you're saving from what you're protecting? I mean, that's kind of a judgment call at that point, and I don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the environment to make a decision on definitely one way or another on this.
Yeah.
All right. What else? Have we
I think we
covered
covered-
everything that
I
anybody
think
is?
we beat the horse dead.
Sorry, I wanted to let everyone have a chance to talk before I started all through my notes.
Yeah, I think you probably looked at it more closely than some of the rest of us did, certainly more closely than I did.
Well,
But-
I mean, RFPs are kind of the thing that I, as an architect, I do a lot. So this is
Yeah.
kind of, I mean,
that's-
this is
that's
something
good.
familiar for me.
That's helpful for us and for Evan in particular. So I've got a lot of notes here, and like I said before, I'll review the tape and just to make sure I haven't missed anything, and sort of write these all up in maybe a slightly more organized, more articulate fashion than my notes. And I'll pass that on to Evan, and he will do with it whatever he does. I'm sure Evan will be happy to to get our feedback and our suggestions on what he can do with the RFP.
When is he planning on putting this out?
That I don't know. I think Evan optimistically was hoping to have it all out by now. But he's got so many things going on that I think I had gotten the impression we discussed this in our meeting here a couple of months back, and I know Evan had. I mean, I was trying to remember. I didn't take very many notes, and I didn't capture the recording of it, so I don't know. I don't remember much of the detail. I do remember that Evan said he thought we would be able to get by with 1 day a week of on-site support, where now we've got 2. I think I remember him saying that. But in any case, you have any that's that detail. I think that was one of the things he intended to do. I was hoping Evan would have updated this RFP to some extent with some of the ideas he's had in mind, but obviously not. And all he had to give us was what he wrote a year ago.
If he's looking at turning this around pretty quickly, I mean, maybe we can be available for another meeting this month if he wants to come back with questions or anything about some of the recommendations that we made.
Yes.
I don't know how much value that is for him or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
No harm
Absolutely.
to
I agree.
offer. No harm to offer.
No, absolutely not. I think, I would be happy to make a note of that here.
Do we know what the status of the current contract is? Is it still in force right now, or are we just doing like month to month, or?
I believe it's month to month at this point.
Okay,
Yeah, he's got a good relationship with the people he's using.
okay. That makes sense.
Which I think falls under time and materials.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I worked for a number of municipalities like way back in the early 2000s, and I'm pretty sure all of that was just build time and materials.
Yep. In the past, prior to this current contractor, we had a formal contract, for 1 year or 3 years at a time. But yeah, as we were talking back near the beginning of the meeting, that the plan to continue that sort of fell through, and Evan had to scramble to line up CMD as our contractor on a month to month basis. And now he's looking to sort of get back into a more permanent contractual basis. Relatively permanent. I know the way this RFP was written up, it was written up for 1 year with a possible 1-year extension or two.
Mhm.
Evan may be thinking of going with a 3-year contract. I know he had, oh, that was on another topic, I guess, but yeah, he has more authority to approve on his own some longer term contracts. So I don't know what his intent is with this one, but we'll find out sooner or later.
Okay.
Okay, anything else that anybody has on the RFP? I'd say we got it. I got some good stuff here. I'll pass that on to Evan and I'll offer the committees, we can meet as needed before our next regularly scheduled meeting if Evan would find that to be at all helpful. So
Sounds good.
With that, the next agenda item is an update from the town administrator. I asked Evan if he had anything he wanted to pass on to the committee, but it's by way of a general update. And he mentioned just 2 things very briefly, that he is preparing the rollout of Office 365, and that he is 98% done with the phone system upgrade. So
And
that's
this
all.
is going to be the one that where it'll then be able to use the schools as a backup in case there is a phone outage.
Yes, if I remember correctly, that's what his plan is. Sort of unifying the phone system a little bit more than it has been. And with that, that's all I have from Evan. Our next agenda item is to review and approve the previous meeting minutes. The May 4th meeting was, as those of us who were participating remember, an extremely brief meeting. So there wasn't much to write up for minutes.
I move approval as drafted with any corrections we may discuss.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded that the minutes of the May 4th meeting be approved as drafted. Any correction, any discussion? Hearing none. I guess I have to do this as a roll call vote. Alan,
Aye.
Bob H,
Aye.
Bob C,
Aye.
Amar,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Before we adjourn, there's just one thing, a reminder, I guess. This month, now that it's actually June, I can say this month, the select board is going to do their annual reappointment process. As I recall, Bob Hassinger and myself are up for reappointment for this committee. And the select board's wonderful new procedure means that we have to go in and interview for the job. I don't know if they're going to have any other applicants. I do know there was one other applicant for the vacancy that Amar filled. So we shall see how that all plays out. I think they were going to do the interviews maybe week after next, but I'm not sure. It might be later
20
on.
something, 2030.
Yeah, that could be.
I asked and I did not get a solid answer on whether one may do that by Zoom. I can't see a lot of, there are a lot of appointees to be dealt with that night, and
So
it's hard to see them all having to be in the conference room.
So
I do
I'll
remember-
make, so I'll just make the comment that at least last year they'd had both people in person and via Zoom.
Yep.
And my opinion only is that there is a lot more favorable outcomes for people who are there in person than were on Zoom, but definitely more favorable outcomes for people on Zoom than people who didn't come at all. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's
they're-
what my impression.
Yeah, they're
apparently,
stated,
I have the impression they changed the rules, and you have to be present to win.
yeah, their stated policy is you have to show up, whether it's in person or Zoom. If you don't show up, then they basically, if you don't show up and someone else did show up for the same slot, you're SOL.
Well, I
But
thought I
so,
was told that you had to show up, period. You didn't have it. You couldn't gamble on no one else.
right,
You
yeah, you want to, yeah,
had to at least participate, but whatever the rule is, in order to be appointed. I gather that they've got a change, they've shifted their focus on how they want to do reappointments for many, many years. If you were willing to keep going, you kept going forever.
yeah. Now their stated policy is if you're up for reappointment and somebody else is also interested in that slot, you don't have an advantage by being the incumbent.
So, do you know, so I'm not obviously, my two positions aren't up this time, so I don't know if there's any messages or emails as far as the process this time, but do you know if they're going to be seeking out input from the chairs of the boards or whatnot this time? I know that last time they specifically said they didn't want that. And I know a lot of that's based around some of the appointments for some of the committees are pretty political these days. But do you know if that's
There-
changed back, or is that still going to be the moving
There
forward?
again, their stated policy is they will not accept input from other committee members. That the decision will be based solely upon the applicant's presentation of themselves at the interview. For better or for worse, that's how they've chosen to do things.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I have opinions, but probably not for here.
Yeah. Yeah, and with that in mind, we're also just about due for our annual committee reorganization, which we will schedule for our regular July meeting, since that will occur after the reappointments have been made or the appointments have been made.
They become effective the 1st of July.
Yes.
I mean, they've been made by then. There were times when.
I think maybe last year was in July. I don't remember who this. I know Dave obviously the chair. Who is the vice chair?
We don't actually have a vice chair.
Oh,
We have in recent years had a chair and a clerk.
gotcha.
And our clerk was Bill Jones, who resigned from the committee around the beginning of the year. And so I have been taking the notes and writing up the minutes, sort of serving as combined chair / clerk. But that's something that we can now, our committee is now fully populated and will be as of July 1st, whether it's the same people or different people. So the committee will certainly, want to be thinking about who should serve as chair and who should serve as clerk.
And both of you two have put in interest on being reappointed.
Yes.
Of course, they might decide not to appoint. Look,
Yes.
re-advertise for.
Have they ever done that? Like,
Not-
oh, I guess they have. I
Right
remember
in
one.
this setting. But
Yeah,
almost anything you can imagine has happened at some point.
yeah. I just remembered one a couple years ago that was pretty high visibility, where it specifically was turned down with no one to replace.
I think I know who that was.
Yeah, I believe it was for housing trust.
Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah, yeah.
And that keeps being controversial. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, not everyone could be as uncontroversial as the IT committee.
Well, true. But then some committees can manage to actually accomplish things.
Yeah.
You know how long that committee has existed? You know how many units have been produced? I understand how hard it is, and I understand all the problems. Still, interesting times we have.
Yes.
I
Yes.
move we adjourn.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Clark,
Aye.
Mr. Carroll,
I,
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Vote motion carried unanimously. The meeting is adjourned.